In the last video, we saw our main character, the almighty legendary player known as God Jinwoo, finally cleared the 100th floor of Battle of Summoners, causing the game world to merge with reality before he was hit by a truck. After waking his lazy body up after 3 whole years, he learned monsters, dungeons and summons had become part of everyday life, while players around the world and in his country searched for God Jinwoo because Korea was stuck at rock bottom. To regain his past prime, he chose to start the tutorial where Jinwoo unexpectedly summoned an X-rank wind fairy named Ramba and discovered hidden isolated summons existed. Soon after, he entered his first dungeon, where Ramba and an angry gorilla barely defeated a furious gray wolf. After clearing the dungeon, Jinwoo asked for his sister's help, from whom he learned more about the changed world. Wanting to adapt quickly, he decided to visit the player zone built around the Tower of Trials. As they walked through the streets, Ajin suddenly called out to her brother, reminding him that he had just mentioned pulling a summon. Curious, she questioned what exactly he had gotten, to which Jinwoo casually replied that it was a fairy. Ajin immediately remarked that she had never heard of such a summon before and eagerly asked him to let her see it. However, Jinwoo groaned and firmly denied her request, stating that there was no chance of him showing it right now. His response instantly annoyed Ajin. She questioned why he was acting so secretive when they were not strangers. She further remarked that showing it once would not somehow wear it out. Jinwoo then smirked slightly and responded by telling her to show hers first. Hearing that, Ajin giggled before agreeing. Without wasting any more time, Ajin activated her mana as a purple aura gathered around her body. She confidently warned him not to get too shocked after seeing it. Jinwoo quietly wondered what kind of summon could possibly make her this confident. Moments later, a C-rank shadow elf appeared before them, causing Jinwoo to petrify in disappointment. Despite his thoughts, he only gave a bland reaction on the outside. Ajin immediately became irritated and questioned why his response was so lukewarm. She proudly explained that subhuman summons were considered noble tier summons among players. Jinwoo simply nodded while calmly observing the shadow elf. Internally, however, he recalled how summons like these were merely average C-rank units in the game and were often used as synthesis material. Trying to understand something else, Jinwoo suddenly questioned whether the shadow elf could speak Korean. The summon gave no further response as Ajin groaned in embarrassment and questioned what exactly he was trying to do. Jinwoo casually remarked that he was only greeting his little sister's proud summon and asking it to take good care of her. Ajin then responded by stating that summons were obviously not supposed to talk in the first place. Her words caused Jinwoo to freeze slightly. In his mind, he immediately recalled how Ramba had spoken naturally ever since they first met. He even remembered her hugging him earlier. Confused, he questioned how Ramba could speak if summons were not meant to talk at all. Jinwoo cautiously remarked that summons ordinarily could not speak, though since Ramba talked, he assumed human-type summons might have changed due to the reality patch. Ajin looked at him with confusion and questioned who had ever heard of a talking summon before. Realizing he had nearly exposed himself, Jinwoo quickly tried to recover the conversation. Ajin then demanded for him to summon his fairy as well, since she had already shown hers first. However, Jinwoo immediately denied the request and stated that he would show her later. Ajin loudly protested and complained that he was acting like a scammer after making her reveal her summon first. Ignoring her complaints, Jinwoo simply walked ahead while thinking that letting Ramba speak in front of others right now would only attract unnecessary attention. He silently concluded that he needed to be more careful from now on. Jinwoo then told Ajin to stop complaining and hurry up with guiding him around the area. After walking for some time, they finally reached a massive location near the Tower of Trials. Looking around the area, Jinwoo questioned whether this place had really once been an amusement park. Ajin affirmed it and explained that after the tower appeared, the company completely tore the entire place down. Jinwoo questioned why they would go that far. Ajin responded by asking who would want to play beside such a gloomy tower in the first place. Jinwoo lightly remarked that the atmosphere honestly sounded thrilling instead. Jin quickly denied it, stating that once dungeons started appearing around the amusement park, nobody wanted to visit anymore. Jinwoo quietly observed the area while thinking that, despite how dangerous dungeons truly were, seeing locations from the game appear in reality still felt strangely exhilarating. Soon, his attention shifted toward a large marketplace nearby. He questioned whether that place was the marketplace players used. Jin affirmed it and explained that players traded everything there, from summoning scrolls to runes and equipment. Hearing her explanation, Jinwoo felt nostalgic. In the game, this marketplace had always been crowded with players opening scrolls and showing off rare items. Jin pointed toward the center of the marketplace and explained that almost everything he needed could be found there. She further advised him to ask at the information desk if he needed proper guidance, since she herself was still only a beginner player. After hesitating briefly, she suggested that he should check out the academy run by player headquarters because he still needed to learn the basics properly. However, Jinwoo calmly denied the idea. He remarked that there was no need for him to learn slowly since he would be spending all his time leveling up from now on anyway. Jin stared at him worriedly and questioned whether he would truly be all right on his own. Jinwoo calmly reassured her and told her she could head back first. Jin hesitated before asking whether he really planned to stay there by himself. Jinwoo nodded once more and stated that he only wanted to look around for a while longer. As he walked away, Jin quietly watched him from behind. She could not help thinking that Jinwoo had been acting extremely strange lately. Ever since waking up, he constantly behaved like someone completely different. Still, despite her worries, she eventually convinced herself that he was probably just trying to process everything happening around him. In the end, she simply told him to contact her if he needed any help before finally leaving the area. After finding a quiet location where nobody seemed to pass by, Jinwoo confirmed that the surroundings were empty before summoning Ramba. The moment she appeared, Ramba excitedly screamed his name and rushed toward him. However, Jinwoo immediately hushed her and warned her not to speak loudly outside anymore. Ramba blinked in confusion and questioned why she suddenly could not talk. Jinwoo then explained that people could never find out about her abnormality. From now on, she was only allowed to speak while inside dungeons. Ramba quietly stared at him before reluctantly accepting his warning. After organizing his thoughts, Jinwoo pulled out his phone and checked his current bank balance. The moment he saw the number, he let out a bitter sigh. He only had 12,501 left. Staring at the screen, he questioned how life could possibly become any worse than this. Working part-time jobs like before would only waste valuable time now. Some people might suggest relying on his parents, but even thinking about such an option disgusted him. His parents were already struggling through multiple jobs just to keep the family afloat. Still, after calming himself, Jinwoo slowly clenched his fist and remarked that none of it really mattered. Even if he had to start from nothing again, he believed he could still climb back to the top. God Jinwoo once became unmatched despite being a complete F2P player in a brutally pay-to-win game. If he managed to survive and dominate under those conditions before, then reality itself would not stop him either. With determination slowly returning to his eyes, Jinwoo silently vowed that he would absolutely claw his way back to the top. Suddenly, a notification appeared on Jinwoo's phone, informing him that 500,000 won had been deposited into his account. The amount instantly shocked him. He stared at the screen in disbelief and questioned what had just happened and where such money suddenly came from. For a moment, he even wondered whether it was some kind of new player support benefit. However, another message quickly arrived shortly afterward. It was from his mother. In the message, she explained that Jin had told her he was trying hard again, and knowing his personality, she understood that he would never ask for help himself. Because of that, she quietly decided to send him some money. Reading the message left Jinwoo speechless for a moment. He quietly thought about everything his mother had already endured during the past years. She spent all her time nursing him, taking care of him, and waiting for him to recover, yet she probably barely had enough money for herself. Even so, she still chose to support him without hesitation. Jinwoo recalled the warmth of her hand from the hospital and remembered her softly assuring him that she would always remain by his side until he opened his eyes again and became healthy. Tightening his grip around the phone, Jinwoo silently thanked her in his heart. At that moment, he firmly resolved that he would absolutely succeed one day and make sure his entire family lived comfortably without struggling anymore. Jinwoo then calmed himself and began organizing his thoughts once more. The others had already spent the past 3 years advancing far ahead of him, meaning every minute and second now carried value. If he truly wanted to catch up and eventually become the strongest, then he had to act accordingly from the very beginning. In order to gather the resources needed for growth, he first needed to clear dungeons efficiently. However, before anything else, he needed a proper team. Without wasting time, Jinwoo tore open several summoning scrolls one after another. Soon, an F-rank sludge appeared, followed by an F-rank hornet butterfly, and finally an E-rank poison lizard. After examining the summons, Jinwoo quietly remarked that his luck honestly seemed decent so far. If Ramba were also considered an E-rank summon, then pulling 2 successful summons with such low probabilities within only 5 attempts was already impressive. On top of that, the poison lizard possessed fairly decent cost-effectiveness for an early summon. Jinwoo carefully looked over the small group before concluding that this lineup would work for now. His current strategy was simple. He would continue pulling summons, equip them with runes according to different situations, fight through dungeons, and steadily level them up. In short, building teams and hunting summoning scrolls formed the core of the boss growth system. As those thoughts settled in his mind, Jinwoo's expression slowly hardened with determination. He recalled the existence of the 10 legendary X-rank summons hidden throughout the world. In the original game, obtaining all 10 and forming the ultimate team made clearing even the 100th floor of the Tower of Trials effortless. Remembering that overwhelming power, Jinwoo quietly vowed that he would locate every remaining X-rank summon before anyone else could reach them. Jinwoo stepped forward while thinking that the first thing he needed to do was find a dungeon. As he looked around, he quietly recalled how simple everything used to be back when this was only a mobile game. In the past, all he had to do was tap on a stage and immediately enter. However, now that everything had become reality, he doubted things would work so conveniently. Wondering how the system functioned now, he glanced toward the nearby dungeon gate, only to suddenly freeze in shock after reading the notice placed outside. In disbelief, he questioned what kind of nonsense this was. Even if someone possessed a summon, they still could not freely enter dungeons anymore. The notice explained that dungeon gates appeared randomly regardless of location, and that their difficulty could be estimated through energy levels. However, due to recent law changes, no one was allowed to enter a dungeon without formally registering as an official player first. Reading all of it immediately depressed Jinwoo. He bitterly thought about how terrible his luck truly was. Out of all possible timings, he had to wake up right after the laws became stricter. While he stood there frustrated, Ramba lightly tapped against him as though trying to cheer him up. Seeing her reaction, Jinwoo smiled faintly and gently patted her head. At that moment, he decided to call Ajin. As soon as she answered, she questioned what time he planned to return home since their mother was asking what he wanted for dinner. Jinwoo casually replied that he would grab something outside instead. More importantly, he questioned whether she knew about the new dungeon regulations requiring official player registration before entry. Hearing this caused her to flinch, but she immediately affirmed it. Smirking slightly, he questioned whether she intentionally forgot to mention such an important detail. Ajin quickly denied the accusation and explained that she genuinely forgot because the regulations were still fairly new. She further informed him that too many people had recently died inside dungeons, forcing the government to step in. According to her, the situation had become complete chaos. That was why warning notices and restrictions were now placed outside dungeon gates everywhere. After ending the call, Jinwoo let out a tired sigh while thinking that everything had become unnecessarily troublesome. Registration procedures, evaluations, and tests all sounded like a massive hassle. However, after thinking more calmly, he admitted that the government's decision did make sense. If everyone rushed into dungeons blinded by greed and fantasies of becoming powerful, society itself would eventually collapse into chaos. Ajin had also explained another important detail during the call. Every year, both domestic and international rankings were announced for the top 100 players. Unfortunately, their country barely held any presence in the global rankings anymore. She jokingly remarked that if the legendary god Jinwoo suddenly appeared, their country's standing would probably rise overnight. Hearing those words caused Jinwoo to cough awkwardly before quickly thanking her for the information and hanging up. After calming himself, he decided that he would properly begin tomorrow and simply rest for the night. The following morning, Jinwoo woke up early and prepared to leave the house. His father looked visibly surprised upon seeing him already awake at 6 in the morning. Jinwoo calmly affirmed that he needed to head out early today. His mother quickly approached him and asked whether he was leaving already, offering to prepare rice balls before he went. However, Jinwoo gently denied the offer and stated that he would be fine. After tidying himself up, he suddenly paused and quietly apologized to his parents for constantly showing them his shortcomings all this time. He also sincerely thanked them before stepping outside. His father watched him leave with an awkward expression and remarked that the kid was suddenly making things uncomfortable. Meanwhile, his mother could only worry about whether Jinwoo would truly be all right. Her husband reassured her by explaining that the government now provided proper safety training for players as well. Even so, she silently prayed for her son's safety. It was then explained that ever since the era where all adults could potentially become players began, South Korea quickly became infamous for having an extremely high dungeon mortality rate. The reason behind it was eventually analyzed as a greed-driven main character syndrome. Countless players convinced themselves that they were protagonists of some fantasy story and recklessly challenged dungeons far beyond their abilities, only to die. Because so many talented gamers lost their lives during this period, the nation that was once considered a gaming powerhouse eventually fell near the bottom of the rankings. Hearing this explanation, Jinwoo quietly thought that dying over delusions sounded genuinely pathetic. Even though he spent 10 years addicted to the game himself, he still found the situation somewhat embarrassing. After arriving at the registration center, Jinwoo submitted his application to the receptionist, who calmly accepted it. Curious, Jinwoo questioned how many applicants would actually receive player qualifications. The receptionist informed him that only the 50 people who passed the final examination would officially obtain player status. Hearing that instantly made Jinwoo nervous as he looked behind him and noticed over 1,000 people already lined up. However, he quickly regained confidence. If he failed something this basic after everything he knew, then being called Ilcheon would have meant nothing. At the cafe nearby, a man suddenly slammed a pile of application forms onto the desk and complained that selecting only 50 candidates out of such a large group was ridiculous. He argued that headquarters needed to recruit more talented individuals if they truly wanted capable players. The man was Park Chang-sok, one of the headquarters examiners. However, before things could settle down, a sudden explosion erupted nearby, instantly throwing the entire area into chaos. People screamed and scattered in panic. Park Chang-sok quickly questioned who was responsible for the attack. Moments later, a man appeared alongside his summon and loudly called out toward Park Chang-sok, remarking that he looked surprisingly relaxed after killing all of his men. Park Chang-sok immediately cursed at the insane bastard while preparing for battle. Park Chang-seok activated Earth Spines and summoned his creatures as tension rapidly filled the area. The surrounding crowd became terrified after realizing that both the syndicate and player headquarters were involved in the conflict. Meanwhile, Jinwoo remained seated farther away with earphones still in place, completely disconnected from the situation. Only after noticing the panic around him did he finally remove them and glance behind himself in confusion. Staring at the chaos unfolding nearby, he quietly questioned what kind of insane situation he had suddenly walked into. The people around the area trembled in fear as panic rapidly spread through the crowd. Some questioned what they were supposed to do now and whether they were all going to die there. However, another person quickly tried to calm everyone down by pointing toward Park Chang-sok, stating that everything would be fine because that man was the famous yaksha known for crushing gangsters. Hearing that title caused Jinwoo to recall the criminals he had encountered before. Quietly observing the situation, he thought that gangsters with summons no longer acted like ordinary thugs anymore. Suddenly, Park Chang-sok shouted for everyone to prepare emergency defenses immediately. He ordered the surrounding players to summon their creatures and form protective shields around themselves. Hearing the command, Jinwoo also called out for Ramba. She quickly appeared beside him while trying to understand what exactly was happening. Concerned, she attempted to speak to Jinwoo, though he immediately hushed her and quietly reminded her that she promised not to talk outside anymore. Ramba quickly fell silent after hearing his warning. Meanwhile, the goon across mocked Park Chang-sok and questioned whether the so-called Apostle of Justice could really survive much longer. Immediately afterward, he ordered his orc to attack. Explosions and violent shockwaves erupted across the area as both sides clashed head-on. Jinwoo calmly observed the battle while thinking that interfering carelessly would only drag him into unnecessary trouble. For now, he decided it was better to quietly watch how the players in this world actually fought. The battle quickly intensified as massive attacks collided one after another. The goon arrogantly questioned whether Park Chang-sok truly had nothing more to offer while steadily cornering him. Watching the fight unfold, Jinwoo became visibly shocked. In his eyes, both sides fought terribly compared to what he expected. Behind him, frightened civilians worriedly remarked that Park Chang-sok seemed to be losing. Others added that if the gang members won, they would definitely slaughter ordinary people without hesitation. Hearing those conversations caused Jinwoo to hesitate internally. If he stepped forward and got involved, the entire situation could easily become a massive headache for him. At that moment, the enemy orc swung its massive axe toward Park Chang-sok's earth spines, attempting to destroy them completely. Watching the flow of battle, Jinwoo realized that Park Chang-sok would genuinely die if things continued like this. Finally, he approached him to tap at his shoulder. However, Park Chang-sok immediately shouted back at him and ordered him to stay away from the battlefield. Ignoring the warning, Jinwoo calmly pointed out that the timing of the fire turtle skill was completely wrong. He explained that the support-type summons behind the enemy were constantly applying fire resistance buffs on the blood orc. Because of that, any fire-based attack used at the wrong moment would become completely useless. Hearing those words, Park Chang-sok quickly focused on the enemy formation. Sure enough, every time the buffers activated their skills, the orc's body briefly glowed red. Park Chang-sok instantly realized what Jinwoo meant. He muttered that it really was a fire resistance effect. Without wasting another second, he immediately adjusted his strategy. This time, instead of attacking recklessly, he waited carefully for the resistance buff to disappear. The moment the glow vanished, Park Chang-sok ordered the fire turtle to strike. A massive fire projectile shot forward like an arrow and directly pierced through the enemy orc. Park Chang-sok stared in disbelief before shouting that the attack had actually worked. The goon immediately became shocked and questioned how they figured out the weakness so quickly. Before he could recover, Park Chang-sok's earth spine surged forward and restrained the remaining enemy summons. Another blast from the fire turtle crashed directly into the battlefield, completely shattering the goon's shield. Realizing defeat was unavoidable, the gangster desperately pleaded that he would surrender and turn himself in peacefully. However, Park Chang-sok coldly dismissed his words. He remarked that gang members like him never deserved mercy and that execution was the only fitting punishment. With a snap of his fingers, the earth spines violently crushed the goon on the spot. The surrounding civilians immediately burst into cheers, praising Park Chang-sok and celebrating the death of the gangster. However, Jinwoo stood there silently, unable to react the same way. Even if the man had been a criminal, witnessing someone get killed so casually right in front of everyone still left him disturbed. At that moment, he fully realized that this world was no longer the same one he once knew. Survival here would require far more resolve than he originally expected. After the situation settled down, Park Chang-sok approached Jinwoo and thanked him for his help earlier. He introduced himself properly as an examiner from player headquarters and admitted that without Jinwoo's advice, they might not have been able to stop the terrorist in time. Jinwoo casually denied that it was anything significant. Park Chang-sok then attempted to offer him a proper reward and questioned which guild he belonged to. However, Jinwoo calmly revealed that he had not even officially registered with headquarters yet. Hearing that instantly shocked Park Chang-sok. Park Chang-sok could hardly believe that someone capable of identifying a summon buff among tens of thousands of possible types was still unregistered. He quickly remarked that all they needed now was identity verification if Jinwoo possessed an ID card. Jinwoo simply affirmed and handed him his identification. Park Chang-sok explained that after the background check was completed, headquarters would issue an official reward according to regulations. Jinwoo smiled lightly and stated that he would leave everything in Park Chang-sok's hands before calmly walking away. After Jinwoo left the area, Park Chang-sok immediately took out his phone and contacted someone. He explained that he had just sent over some information and requested a full investigation into Jinwoo's background. Meanwhile, outside the building, Jinwoo handed a cream bread to Ramba. The moment she received it, her eyes sparkled with delight as she happily drooled over it. Watching her reaction caused Jinwoo to quietly think that she was surprisingly simple to please. He had heard stories about players constantly arguing with their summons, yet Ramba became satisfied with something as small as cream bread. Thinking back to the earlier battle, Jinwoo admitted that he never originally intended to interfere. However, if he had stayed silent, everyone inside might have died. The world had changed far more drastically than he initially believed. After organizing his thoughts once again, Jinwoo concluded that he could no longer delay hunting. The first priority now was gathering summoning scrolls as quickly as possible so he could obtain stronger summons. Among all the summons he remembered, the highest priorities were the training instructor and the dragon mage. Since they were only E rank and D rank summons, they could still be obtained through low-grade scrolls. Slowly standing up, Jinwoo quietly remarked that it was finally time for him to start moving properly. The following day, Park Chang-sok was genuinely shocked after learning that Jinwoo had been hospitalized for 3 years due to a car accident. Quietly processing the report, Park Chang-sok remarked that it explained why Jinwoo behaved like such an unrealistic player despite being unregistered. Thinking back carefully, he recalled how chaotic the world became 3 years ago when dungeons and summons first appeared. During that period, accidents and disasters happened everywhere, so in a way, Jinwoo's situation made sense. The employee on the other end of the call affirmed Park Chang-sok's thoughts before adding another surprising detail. Jinwoo applied for player registration almost immediately after being discharged from the hospital. Hearing that caused Park Chang-sok to quickly shuffle through the stack of applications on his desk until he finally found Jinwoo's form. Quietly staring at the papers, he questioned what exactly he was looking at. As the junior cautiously asked whether there was a problem, Park Chang-sok immediately denied it before calmly instructing him to inform this month's assigned examiner that he would personally handle the evaluation instead. He also ordered him not to question the reason behind the decision. As the junior affirmed to end the call, Park Chang-sok quietly thought to himself, waking up after a 3-year coma was already unbelievable on its own, but adapting quickly enough to apply for player registration immediately afterward meant Jinwoo possessed extraordinary adaptability. In Park Chang-sok's eyes, Jinwoo might truly become an exceptional talent in the future. Meanwhile, Jinwoo arrived at the examination center while casually observing the surroundings. At first, he expected there to be a decent number of applicants, but after seeing the massive crowd gathered there, even he became surprised. Looking around at the countless people waiting for the exams, he questioned whether all of them really came for player training. Still, despite the competition, Jinwoo remained calm. To him, defeating these competitors would be easy because nobody understood games better than he did. Soon, the examination officially began. Jinwoo smiled slightly, feeling excited for the process to finally start. However, his expression immediately changed after the examiner stepped onto the stage. Standing there confidently was Park Chang-sok himself. Park Chang-sok introduced himself as the headquarters examiner for the session before announcing the start of the pre-written exam training. Later, Jinwoo was called into a separate room where Park Chang-sok casually remarked that he must have been surprised earlier. Jinwoo calmly admitted that he truly did not expect Park Chang-sok to personally appear as the examiner. Park Chang-sok then questioned how the training session felt for him. As Jinwoo recalled the lecture, he remembered Park Chang-sok explaining various summon combinations commonly appearing on written exams. However, midway through the explanation, Jinwoo suddenly realized that one of the combinations being taught was actually a strategy he himself created years ago back in the game. Internally, he became annoyed and thought that they should have at least asked for permission before using his ideas so freely. In the present, Jinwoo calmly remarked that the training session was not bad overall. Park Chang-sok nodded with satisfaction before explaining the real reason he called him separately. Before discussing the reward from the earlier incident, there was something he wanted to ask first. Carefully observing Jinwoo, Park Chang-sok questioned whether he had once been a gamer. Park Chang-sok clarified that gamers referred to players who used to play Battle of Summons before the world changed. Regardless of skill level or playtime, anyone who experienced the original game was considered a gamer, and nearly 70% of Korean rankers came from that background. Hearing the explanation, Jinwoo quietly understood why Park Chang-sok asked the question. After all, it would seem suspicious for someone without player registration to possess such detailed summon knowledge. Jinwoo calmly admitted that he did play the game before. Instantly, Park Chang-sok leaned forward with excitement and questioned how long he had played for. Jinwoo internally realized that admitting he spent 10 entire years on the nearly dead game would immediately make him stand out too much. Because of that, he casually responded that he played for around a year. Hearing that answer made Park Chang-sok visibly shocked in disbelief. He loudly questioned whether Jinwoo was serious. Meanwhile, Jinwoo quietly wondered if he downplayed it too much. However, Park Chang-sok reacted completely differently than expected. Instead of doubting him, he looked genuinely impressed and remarked that playing the game consistently for an entire year was already unusual. Most Korean rankers apparently played for less than half a year before the world changed. Hearing this caused Jinwoo to quietly accept the misunderstanding rather than correcting it. After calming down, Park Chang-sok explained that he prepared two possible reward options for Jinwoo. The first option involved immediate player registration through headquarters authority, along with a secure job position at headquarters itself. Park Chang-sok emphasized that obtaining such a position was even harder than entering a major corporation. The second option was a direct cash reward worth 5 million won. Hearing the choices immediately made Jinwoo think the answer was obvious. Meanwhile, Park Chang-sok confidently assumed Jinwoo would naturally choose the first option. Instant player registration and a headquarters position were benefits most players could only dream about. However, contrary to expectations, Jinwoo calmly stated that he would take the money instead. Hearing that answer visibly stunned Park Chang-sok. Slightly confused, he reminded Jinwoo that ordinary player registration would take much longer otherwise. However, Jinwoo politely thanked him for the concern and explained that he would handle the registration process himself. He further clarified that he had no real intention of joining headquarters in the first place. Internally, Jinwoo already knew his priorities. He was far too busy searching for powerful summons to waste time tied down to headquarters responsibilities. After thanking Park Chang-sok once again, he calmly left the room and headed toward the registration portal for the practical examination. At the entrance, the staff member explained that all applicants simply needed to clear the daily dungeon within the time limit. This time, the assigned test area was the Tuesday dungeon, and the evaluation focused heavily on completion speed. As the explanation continued, Park Chang-sok quietly observed Jinwoo from behind. He still could not believe that Jinwoo rejected his earlier offer so easily. Earlier, the professor praised Jinwoo's written application with overwhelming excitement. According to him, his understanding of game systems and summon mechanics surpassed everyone else they had seen so far. He even admitted that his analysis exposed how narrow their own perspectives had been all this time. One employee boldly remarked that Korea might have finally found someone capable of reaching the global rankings. Hearing such praise caused even Park Chang-sok to become uneasy. For the first time, he witnessed those arrogant professors react with genuine admiration. Quietly biting his nails, he wondered whether he should have offered Jinwoo far better conditions. Meanwhile, the staff member finally concluded the explanation and informed Jinwoo that he could now enter the dungeon. Taking a deep breath, Jinwoo quietly remarked that he should give it a try. Moments later, he stepped through the portal. The moment he entered, system panels appeared around him. The dungeon briefing explained that the area was filled with highly dangerous slimes, and that the objective was to defeat them before escaping as quickly as possible. Immediately, Jinwoo called out for Ramba. She quickly appeared beside him and enthusiastically affirmed that she would start building up stacks right away. As Jinwoo looked around the dungeon, he immediately understood why it was called the Tuesday Dungeon. The structure forced players into encountering the boss almost immediately. Most beginners wasted all their time wandering around while fighting endless slimes and getting lost inside the maze-like paths. However, Jinwoo simply smiled. The slimes themselves were incredibly slow, and the optimal strategy was to ignore almost all of them while continuously moving straight toward the objective. Since he spent years repeatedly clearing this dungeon back in the game, navigating through it now felt unbelievably simple to him. Jinwoo quickly ran through the pathways before finally discovering the correct route. Confidently, he thought that once they crossed this path, the clear would practically be guaranteed. However, before he could proceed further, numerous warning panels suddenly appeared before him. A powerful pressure filled the room as the boss monster revealed itself. For the first time since entering this world, Jinwoo finally saw it in reality. A massive giant slime appeared before him.